Hi, I'm Brad Ricca. I've written 3 books, American Mastodon, Super Boys, and Mrs. Sherlock Holmes. And you can find them everywhere books are sold.
Is it frustrating to write a book about Grace Humiston, never still in many ways be a mystery?
It was very frustrating. I almost quit it, I think, 2 times because I was going ahead with it and I just assumed that there would be all this great stuff on her out there, that she would have an archive, she would have letters and all her court cases, but there was nothing. There was absolutely nothing. And at one point I said, I can't write this book because I have nothing on her. And then I realized that I could write the book if I approached it as a mystery, you know, where they have, in a murder, this is awful, but you have the chalk outline of the body, the taped off outline. And I said, well, if I approach her like that, and just, you know, because I don't know who's in the middle, but do all the stuff around it, maybe I can piece the case together. And to me, this was really liberating, because this was what I was trying to do in the first place, was solve the case of Ruth Kruger, who was missing too, and there's no concrete answers there either. So just to go around it and see what kind of answer forms in the middle. Because I think that's part of the mystery, is where'd she go? How come we don't know that she was the first woman to be a U.S. District Attorney? She did all this stuff to make the country a better place, and we don't know her name at all. That's a mystery that we have to still solve.
Does she have a legacy?
I think she does in a few places. I think certainly with the way missing persons cases are handled, in certain ways, like really subtle ways that she established when she was in New York, but in a lot of ways, I think were she here, she would be kind of horrified that we still approach missing persons cases the same way. And she would say, you know, the victim, it's not their fault. It's someone else's fault. That was always kind of the thing that she kept saying about Ruth. I know Ruth is a good girl, and I think we've unfortunately kind of lost that. I always hated true crime back when I used to work in a bookstore, because those books had like the worst pictures, the worst covers, they're gory, but I think it was kind of fear of it too. There's also a lure to it too. I mean, everyone who's ever written true crime kind of always goes back and says, well, then there's, you know, In Cold Blood. And you read that and there's something else to it, and you can see that it can do something. So I'm not that, I don't hate it, you know, I mean, that's kind of a dramatic way of saying it. I wish no one would have to write about it, because then it wouldn't exist, but it does. But you kind of read that book and see it as kind of a challenge, and then a story comes along and you think about, how can I tell that story that's going to have the most impact, especially a story that's been forgotten and a victim that's been forgotten. It's wrong, I think, but I think it happens that, you know, you think, oh, you can save this, you can solve this, you can bring it back, because you can't do any of that, because it's over, it's done. But you can tell the story to someone new.
With Super Boys, you also delved into the realm of comics.
Mm-hmm.
And Cleveland has produced a lot of sequential arts talent. Brian K. Vaughan, Bendis, Sumarak, even folks like Bill Watterson, and Terry Liebenson.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any theory as to why Cleveland has been such a reliable cauldron for comics talent?
So I've thought about that a lot, because there are a ton of people, a ton of really good people out of Cleveland, and even more. I think, and this is like a longer or like a larger argument, and it's really a lame argument, but I think it's the weather. I think with Cleveland, you have to stay inside for a large portion of the year. And there's something about staying inside, having to stay inside, where you're kind of stuck with especially when you're a kid, but you're kind of stuck with your own thoughts. And I think that environment is easier to create something, especially when it's something as outlandish as superheroes. But it's like, you know, they say when you're in you live somewhere where there's no sunlight, you wear like the sunlight goggles, or, you know, in some ways making comics, that's creating your own light. That's just a theory. I've never tested it. But because plenty of people come from California and so on, but I know I would have been outside way more, not inside reading X-Men because it's snowing for the 80th day in a row.
Who is your favorite X-Man, and why is it Kitty Pryde?
Did I say once it was Kitty Pryde?
No, I'm making a broad generalization.
Okay, I don't know that it's Kitty Pryde. I really like Kitty Pryde. I never liked Kitty Pryde when I was reading it as a kid because she, she kind of held him back a little bit. She had goofy costume, then she had horrible code names. She was called Sprite once, named after a soft drink.
Ariel.
Yeah, Ariel. But then when you look back, you realize she was the genius that she was the one, that she shows up right at the perfect time after all this trauma in the story that like ripped the hearts and souls of X-Men fans. I can't believe we're talking about the X-Men. She comes in and she kind of makes it new again. And that's a great storytelling lesson there. And she turns out to be this great character. I mean, she does like some weird things. Well, they all do weird things. But I don't know if she's my favorite. I don't know if I have. I really like, I like Longshot. I like Havoc. Always liked Havoc.
So you're big into the Australia years.
Yeah, all years.
So am I like talking to like Dazzler's only fan?
Love Dazzler in the X-Men when she's in it. When she's in it in those years in Australia, she's terrific.
Tell me about your relationship with Harvey Pekar. How did you know him?
I didn't know him. He was profoundly influential on me, but I didn't know him. I went to where he spoke. It was some kind of a release party or something. I've always been a fan, but I never met him. And he said something there. Somebody asked, like, well, how do you get published? And he said, the key to being published is not caring, and I'm butchering the quote, but he said, not caring what the other person thinks. He says, you put it in an envelope and you let them worry about it. He says, if they like it, they'll publish it. If they don't, they won't. And that was like so profound. He goes, he said the opposite of that. He's like, you sit on it forever trying to make it perfect. And he said, that's a waste. Because this was like kind of anti his personality in some ways. He said, it's a waste to just sit on something. He goes, just send it. Just send it. I can hear him saying it. And I like sent stuff out like, I think that night or the day after and started getting stuff published. It really like changed my life.